Greetings, sports fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Breath of Fresh Air webcast on YouTube. I am your host, Charles Taylor, and I'm by myself for this episode. Hopefully, we can get Patrick Brackett, and maybe Stan Franklin to join me on Thursday. So we'll see how everything goes with that. But before I start, I wish everybody, or I hope everybody, had a safe and happy Thanksgiving with their loved ones. So, with that, let's get to the topics. Been a while since I did a show. I think last Thursday, the Thursday before Thanksgiving. So, a lot of stuff has been happening in the sports world. And I want to start with my university, the University of Texas. Actually, okay, it's not my university per se. I didn't go there. I'm going to the University of North Texas, but that is my favorite football team. And as everybody has heard, I'm sure it is a mess going on with everything with the coaching. So, Charlie Strong, he got fired. Let's start with him. So he got fired after going 16-21 in the 3 seasons he was there before getting fired. Uh, it's not surprising. This isn't surprising he got fired. I know losing to Kansas pretty much sealed that fate. You can't be the coach for the University of Texas and lose to Kansas. That just cannot happen. That ultimately sealed his fate. But there were signs this program was getting back together. And ultimately, it's a results business. The results weren't showing on the field, but there are many coaches you can go to that you can look at, such as the one in Colorado right now, where the fourth year starts to show the progress on the field. I really believe if Charlie Strong was able to stay the fourth year next year would be where Texas would actually start to compete for a Big 12 conference title and maybe a national title. We don't necessarily know, and I guess we won't know because they didn't let Charlie Strong stay. But when he came in, there was a mess. It was a mess he inherited after the last few years of Mac Brown. And I love Mac Brown, as you guys know, but he left a mess. When Charlie Strong got hired, he was not really supported by the boosters there at the University of Texas, the guys who were putting in the money to the university. So from there, it was an uphill battle for Charlie Strong, and the only way he was going to be able to win the people over is if he was able to produce the results, the desired results, meaning championship contending results at the school. That was not happening, so ultimately he wasn't able to keep his job. But there were things that were starting to come up. The players loved playing for him. He was definitely a player's coach. That's one thing. Number two, the recruiting was starting to get better. You had, from what I saw on Fox Sports 1, they had the seventh recruiting class as it stands right now. When he got to Texas, that recruiting was in the mid-teens. Texas should never be that low, ever. Not with all the talent in this state. There is no reason why they should be that low. But Charlie Strong was starting to bring them up. So with the young talent on the team, because Texas was playing a lot of freshmen and sophomores on the team. With those guys getting the experience, it was going to get better. I really think it was going to take some patience. I guess the athletic director and the president, probably from some pushing from the boosters and a little bit of public outcry, decided it was time for a change. But I don't agree with this. I don't like the move. And the guy they brought in to replace him, Tom Herman, who was the guy who coached Houston, of course, I don't understand how he is so hot, why he is getting the pub he is getting. Yes, I get what he did at Ohio State under Urban Meyer, being the offensive coordinator, the guy who called the plays when Ohio State won their national title back in the 2014 season. And what he did in his first year in Houston, leading them to a Peach Bowl, which is one of the New Year's Six bowls, beating Florida State. I get all that. But this year, Houston was not playing that well. Well, not well compared to last year. Yes, they started off beating Oklahoma in the first game of the season. And after that, yes, it was Tom Herman and everybody else. Everybody wanted Tom Herman to come to their school. But all that stopped, especially after they lost to SMU out of all teams. Lost to SMU. by like 2 or 3 touchdowns. So nobody was talking about him being a hot commodity. And now all of a sudden, after beating a Louisville team that is overrated, and I thought was overrated really from the beginning, everybody was talking about what Lamar Jackson was doing for them. But Louisville struggled with Virginia, struggled with Duke. Their best victory was over a 3-loss Florida State team, and they lost to Clemson as well. So why Louisville was ranked so high, I didn't understand that either. Well, as soon as Houston beat them on, what was it, November 17th, as soon as they beat them, it was over. Now everybody wants Tom Herman again. Houston isn't even playing in the American Athletic Conference Championship game. So really, how good is Tom Herman? The Temple and Navy's playing in that game. How good is Tom Herman? And do we really believe he's just going to instantly turn Texas around? I'm just not sure about that. I don't like how any of this went down. I'm still a big supporter of Charlie Strong, and I wish he was able to stay for one more year, because what's going to happen is if Tom Herman does have success, they're going to credit him for being the guy to put him over the top. That is all Charlie Strong's players. So I'm just not a fan of this, me personally. Maybe that changes when we get closer to next season. We start getting into spring ball. Maybe I will have a different outlook on that. But until then, no, I'm not happy with this move. I don't think Tom Herman is that guy who has the ability to just put Texas back on the map, at least not right now. I'm just not a fan of the move. In Strong, I trust. In Strong, I still trust. So with that, let's move on to Notre Dame and the issues that is going on at that university. So Notre Dame finished 4-8. That's not acceptable in Notre Dame standards. And the head coach, Brian Kelly, has been dealing with scandals, and the team just wasn't as good. There were high hopes for this team starting off the year 10th ranked. Of course, everything went awry and accumulated with the loss to USC this past Saturday, 45-27. And now there are reports Brian Kelly may look for another job, may try to go somewhere else. Personally, I don't think Brian Kelly is that good of a coach either. I think he yells a lot. All he does is scream and yell at his players, and he just seems to deflect blame when it really ultimately falls on him. So if he decides to go somewhere else, I mean, look, Notre Dame is one of those jobs. It's kind of a glamorous job, one of the more high profile jobs. And there's probably not too many jobs that are better than Notre Dame. But if he does decide to leave, I don't think Notre Dame would be hurting per se. I don't think you're losing too much in terms of Brian Kelly leaving there. Now, granted, I know in 2012, they got to the national championship game where they got blown out by Alabama. Of course, those victories were vacated now, so I don't know where that stands. But he did have success there, but he was always a guy to me who just yells and just whines and complains about everything. In other words, I don't know if he's getting the most out of those players, probably because they don't feel like being yelled at all the time. So if he does leave, to me, it's all right, cool. See you later. That Notre Dame can get somebody else to come in there, and I think they will do they could do just as good of a job as Brian Kelly did. But Notre Dame, I mean, they've been kind of back and forth in terms of being a hot team anyway. Ever since 2012, they've been rated high, but they never really lived up to expectations since then. So if Brian Kelly leaves, it's not that big of a loss, not in my opinion. So, college football. And we've been talking about college football for these last couple of topics with Texas and Notre Dame, but let's actually talk about some topics on the field. So the college football playoff rankings, the second to the last edition, will come out Tuesday. And the big topic of discussion is what to do with the Ohio State Buckeyes. They had a thrilling victory over Michigan in the game on Saturday in Columbus, 30-27. So as it stands right now, Ohio State sits at number 2 in the rankings behind Alabama, but they will not play in the Big Ten Conference title game. that goes to Penn State, or that berth from the Big Ten East goes to Penn State based off the head-to-head competition where they beat Ohio State 24-21 back in October. So Penn State will play Wisconsin in the title game. Penn State and Wisconsin both have 2 losses for the season. Ohio State has just that 1 loss to Penn State. Again, they're sitting at number 2. They will probably stay at number 2 this week. The test will be what happens when the rankings are finalized on Sunday. It would be hard for me to see a scenario where they leave Ohio State completely out. Do they value conference championships? Do they value the resume? Do they value the non-conference schedule? Ohio State, when you put their resume up against anybody else's, it's comparable. They might have the best out of conference road win in America when you look at what they did to Oklahoma, who can potentially win the Big 12 with the victory over Oklahoma State on Saturday. They hammered Oklahoma. And you look at the wins they had against Michigan and against Wisconsin in Madison. So when you put Ohio State's resume up against anybody else, excluding the conference championship games, they can go up against anybody. If it's against, or if it's the thing where they're looking at the best 4 teams, in my opinion, those best 4 teams are Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Michigan. From what I've seen throughout the year, those are the best 4 teams to me. But at some point, losses do have to matter. You would think, right? You would think, because if that's the case, I've heard people say USC is one of the best 4 teams playing right now. They have 3 losses. They're done. They're not going to get in there. But if Washington beats Colorado, who now is a top 10 team, they're number 9. They will probably move up a little bit when these rankings come out on Tuesday. If they beat Colorado, they win the Pac-12, they're a 1-loss team. Do you leave them out? I don't know what you do. A lot of people see a scenario, and I can see that too, if there's 2 Big Ten teams in there. I think Washington has to lose for that to happen. If Washington is able to beat Colorado and win the Pac-12, I think they're in. They're probably going to move up to number 4 when this ranking comes out. A win over Colorado only helps that. So the way I think it will sit right now, I think Alabama is in regardless of what happens in the SEC championship game against Florida. And I think Clemson will get in as long as they take care of their business against Virginia Tech in the ACC championship game. And Washington, if they beat Colorado in the Pac-12, they'll be in. And I just think Ohio State will be that 4th team in. I know people are going to say, well, they didn't play in their conference championship game. But if they're number 2 right now, do you really drop them out from number 2 to all the way out of the college football playoff? I don't really see that happening, especially if Wisconsin is the team that wins the title. If Penn State wins the Big Ten, that could get a little bit dicey, and that's that could be debatable. But if Wisconsin wins, seeing how State beat them in Madison, there could be a scenario where they look at head-to-head competition there. The thing is, with this committee, you don't know if they're looking at head-to-head competition, the resume. What are they looking at? I guess that's the beauty or the beast of this of this committee and the human element of it. And I've also heard people talk about Michigan potentially getting in. They're not getting in. I'm sorry. Again, I do think Michigan is probably one of the best 4 teams, but for them to have lost the 2 games, I don't see them leapfrogging Michigan State or excuse me, Wisconsin or Penn State, even though they did beat those 2 teams and they beat Colorado, who is playing for the Pac-12 title. It's a lot to digest, I know. So we'll see how everything turns out. But to sum it up, I think it will be Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Washington for these rankings coming up on Tuesday. After that, anybody's guess. I'll have a better guess for you when all the games are done on Saturday. So it'll be very fun to see how Championship Saturday goes with all the conference championship games and how things work out. Generally, all these things work themselves out. And when it comes to picking the 4 teams that will be in the college football playoff, it will probably work out to where there's not a lot of controversy. But we'll see. On to the NFL. And if you saw the Thanksgiving Day games, There was a lot of fun there. Let's start with what everybody's talking about, the Dallas Cowboys. As you guys know, I'm not a Dallas Cowboy fan by any means, but I admit they are doing things I did not think they would do. They are sitting at 10-1 now after a victory over the Washington Redskins, 31-26. Dak Prescott is still doing his thing. Ezekiel Elliott is still a beast. And they are just quietly rolling along. They have the best record in the NFL. Well, I won't say quietly. Anytime you're part of the Dallas Cowboys, you're not being quiet. But they do have a 10-1 record, best record in the NFL. If they continue to play like this, run the football behind that big physical offensive line, and Dak Prescott makes the plays he has to make, it's going to be hard to beat this team. Definitely in the NFC. I don't know if there's a team right now in the NFC that could beat them. I mean, they just swept Washington. They do have a game with the New York Giants coming up in a couple of weeks in New York. New York is, of course, the only team to have beaten Dallas, which was in the opening week of the season. So definitely Dallas is different then, but I think the Giants have gotten better as well. Other than that, I don't know. I mean, Seattle, a lot of people like Seattle, but they only scored 5 points against Tampa Bay yesterday. So I don't know how good Seattle is. Carolina's not the same. Arizona is overrated. I mean, there's who's going to beat Dallas in the NFC? It's hard to really see that at this time. They'll get a little bit of a test coming up on Thursday against the Minnesota Vikings up there in Minneapolis. Minnesota's tough to beat at home, but as long as Dallas just does what they do, I think they will handle Minnesota. Uh, I don't really see too much where Dallas can be beaten. They can be beaten. Don't get me wrong. They can be beaten. They do have some weaknesses there. Their defense gives up a lot of big plays. So if you can get some big plays and find a way to stop Ezekiel Elliott, you have a chance to beat Dallas. But right now, they definitely look like the best team in the conference. Uh, Also, speaking of Minnesota, they lost a tough game in Detroit against the Lions. Now, the Detroit Lions, think about this. The Detroit Lions are first place in the NFC North. Not too many people saw that coming. A lot of people thought that would be the Green Bay Packers, like me. Green Bay is looking really bad right now. Their defense, speaking of bad defenses, they can't stop anybody. They gave up 47 points to Tennessee a couple weeks ago. And last Sunday, they gave up 42 to the Redskins. Now they're at home tonight against the Philadelphia, excuse me, not at home. They go to Philadelphia to play the Eagles tonight on Monday Night Football. So I will go ahead and throw a prediction out there. I think the Eagles win. I just think the Packers have too many issues, too much to ask of Aaron Rodgers, who I still think is one of the best two quarterbacks in the NFL with Tom Brady. But it's just too much for him to ask to cover up for all of those deficiencies on defense and the lack of a running game on offense. Philadelphia is undefeated at home this year, and their defense is very good at home. I just don't see Green Bay breaking that stride. And I think the doldrums, I think the losing streak continues for them. I have Philly winning this game. Probably I'll go 26-23. And so be sure to check up on me with that in the morning. But I have Philadelphia winning. But back to Detroit. Detroit, these guys just find ways to win. They're 7-4 in all their games. They won in the fourth quarter. So if they get in the fourth quarter, be careful. Matthew Stafford finds a way to get it done, and their defense seems to make a play at some point during the fourth quarter. Go back to the game they won against Philadelphia, where they were able to force a fumble and then get into field goal range, win that game. Think about the game-saving interception Darius Slay had. I think it was Darius Slay. Had against who was it? Against the Rams, coming down the stretch of that game. And then in this game against Minnesota, Darius Slay made an interception to set them up off of Sam Bradford. Made an interception to set them up for a field goal to win that game. So what Detroit is doing, one of the more pleasant stories in the league. And then the other Thanksgiving Day game was Pittsburgh Steelers beating the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts without Andrew Luck in that game, but Scott Tozine played pretty well. They had two red zone possessions where they just could not get in the end zone. They went for it on fourth downs, weren't able to get it in there. So that game could have been a little bit different, but Pittsburgh did what they had to do. They took care of business, and now they're sitting at 6-5 behind the Baltimore Ravens in that division, based off of the head-to-head win they have on them. So those are the three games on Thanksgiving. And looking at Sunday's action, New England continues to roll along. They're 9-2, and they are tied with the Oakland Raiders for the best record in the AFC. Oakland, as a matter of fact, would be the team with the best record in the conference based on a few tiebreakers. I think it's conference record, but Oakland has found ways to win too. Go back to the Monday night game against Houston. They were able to win that game in the fourth quarter. And after Carolina came back against them yesterday, scoring 25 unanswered points, Oakland was able to stay the ship and pull that game out. Oakland is one of those teams. Their offense is very potent. They can score with anybody. Like Dallas, they have to figure out a way to shore up the defense a little bit. If they can find a way to take away from those big plays, Oakland is going to be very dangerous. Right now, excuse me. Right now, I would say New England is still the team to beat in that conference. And if they were to play Oakland, I would probably pick them by a little bit. But Oakland is coming. Look out for Oakland. Uh, let's see what else. The Kansas City Denver game. Very good game on Sunday night. Kansas City won in overtime on a last minute field goal. Cairo Santos banged it off the crossbar and it went in, and they were able to pull it out 30-27. A lot of people are giving Broncos coach Gary Kubiak a lot of flack because they felt like maybe he should have either punted the ball or maybe even went for it on fourth down when he had the ball their second or their last possession of the game. He decided to go for a 62, I think it was a 62-yard field goal to win the game. Me personally, I don't have a problem with that call. You're trying to win the game. You have a lot of confidence in your kicker, Brandon McManus. He has hit long field goals before, and in that thin air in Denver, the ball travels. So he said he didn't know if he was going to get the ball back. He was trying to win the game. He had faith in his field goal kicker. Field goal kicker just didn't come through. It happens. And I give him credit for making that call. It just didn't work out. Maybe he could have went for it or something. I agree with some of the opinions out there that maybe he could have just went for it on 4th and 10 to try to get a first down and maybe get closer to field goal range. Maybe he could have called the plays differently on second and third down. But for him to say, hey, I'm trying to win this game, I have no problem with it because you don't want to tie. You don't. Is it better than a loss? Yes, it's better than a loss, but you don't play all that time to tie. You try to win. And I mean, you can live with that decision, even though people can Monday morning quarterback all they want. It's what he gets paid to do. He's the head coach. He makes those tough decisions. That's what he did. It just didn't work out, but I don't fault him for it. Good decision on his part. It just didn't work out. And one more game I wanted to touch on. Oh, Atlanta whooping on Arizona. Well, actually, a couple games. Atlanta beating Arizona. I'll give a shout out for Patrick on that one. And of course, for the Dallas Cowboys, that's a shout out to Stan. But for the Atlanta Falcons, beat the Arizona Cardinals 38-19, looking really balanced. If they play like that, this goes back to what Patrick was talking about with the whole thing of throwing the ball, trying to force feed the ball to Julio Jones. Yes, he has a point there. You don't have to try to force the ball to Julio Jones all the time. If you're Matt Ryan, you have enough weapons on that team with the two running backs, Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman coming back from the hamstring injury. You have Mohamed Sanu, and apparently Taylor Gabriel is a beast too. So you have enough weapons to spread the ball around. That's what Matt Ryan went back to doing yesterday, and it got Atlanta 38 points. They're looking like that juggernaut of offense that didn't really show up in their last game before the bye week at Philadelphia. And Tampa Bay beating Seattle 14-5. The thing that impressed me about Tampa Bay is their defense. Before this game, everybody was talking about how Seattle was that team. They were the team. They're starting to get hot at the right time. They're starting to look like the team that could make a run at the Super Bowl. And they run into Tampa Bay and they harassed Russell Wilson, had him running for his life under pressure. I think they had 6 sacks on him, and it was just a good, solid game plan. They kept everything to where Russell Wilson couldn't just crush them with their legs. He was running for his life all day. The offensive line had a lot of issues trying to block Tampa Bay. So the game plan Tampa Bay had to stop Russell Wilson worked to a T. And what can they do now? Well, Tampa Bay is sitting at six. Is it? Yeah, 6-5. They're sitting at 6-5. They're a game behind Atlanta in the NFC South. They have no more games with Atlanta. They split the 2 games with each team winning on the other's home field. Tampa Bay, though, is looking pretty good. Jameis Winston's playing well. Mike Evans is a beast of a receiver. If they can get the consistent running game going with Doug Martin rounding back into form, Tampa Bay is going to be making some noise in the NFC as well. So, wrapping up the NFL, let's go to something we don't normally talk about on the show to wrap things up. Soccer, yes, U.S. men's soccer to be exact. So, they made the change to get rid of Jurgen Klinsmann as the coach, and they're bringing back Bruce Arena, who has coached the team before. Now, the U.S. does not have another game until March when it comes to the World Cup qualifying, but their last game was an utter disaster, a 4-0 loss in Costa Rica. So now, as they started off, they lost their first 2 games because they lost the game to Mexico 2-1 before the disaster at Costa Rica. I personally think this is a very good move to get rid of Jurgen Klinsmann because he wasn't really bringing anything extra to the team. He was supposed to be the guy who was supposed to get them over the hump, but every big game they played, he had them playing way too conservative, not enough attacking, not enough going forward. They just sat back in the shell on defense and they got whooped. Go back to 2014, the World Cup against Belgium, where the goalkeeper, Tim Howard, had 90,000 saves to even give them a chance to win that game. And for him to save that many shots, and the U.S. only got, I think, 2, 3 shots or however many it was, I mean, that's ridiculous. You have to push up. I understand you want to have enough on the back end so you don't get carved up by teams that are potent offensively, but you have to take some shots. You have to play aggressively. You cannot sit back playing in a shell. That's not going to work against the world's powers. And also, Copa America last year, or actually earlier this year, against Argentina. They got blown out 4-0. Again, sitting in a shell, not being aggressive. You cannot beat these teams being on the defensive all the time. You have to attack at some point. And then the Costa Rica game, I just think was icing on the cake to let him go. They were not going to get better under Jurgen Klinsmann. He had been there for a few years already. They were not going to get better over here, and it just seemed like the players were lifeless. And that, in and of itself, may be the best factor or the biggest factor. Remember when I was talking about Charlie Strong and I said how much the players loved him. The thing is, when the players appreciate you and they love you, that means the effort is there. That means they are doing what they can to try to make things better. They're not just working out. They're not working out at this time. That's not what was happening with the American soccer team. Those players just looked lifeless. There was no emotion out there, and it just seemed like they were just ready to leave. That game against Costa Rica, they just seemed like they were just ready to go home. So I think this is a good move. It's a good change. I think Bruce Arena is a good bridge if he isn't the answer to whoever comes in there and tries to get this nation on par with the rest of the soccer powers. Truthfully, that may never happen to where you're competing all the way with Brazil or Argentina or Germany or any of the other world's powers. But at least let's show up to where we're not getting beat 4-0 by Costa Rica. That's awful. With that, that will wrap up this edition of the Breath of Fresh Air webcast on YouTube. Be sure to check this show out on the YouTube channel I have, which is also titled Breath of Fresh Air, and I am on Facebook, Google Plus, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So I put this webcast on every one of those channels. Be sure to check it out. Leave feedback. Let me know how I'm doing and what do I need to improve on. Well, besides the computer, so I can get the high def camera on the computer. But that's okay. We're working on that. Until later on this week, where hopefully I have a couple people join me on the show. Everybody take care and enjoy the week back from Thanksgiving. Take care.